Scroll of Thoth, Episode 21, November 26th, 2014. Welcome back, everybody. This is James, and unfortunately tonight I am sans Colleen. She had some ministerial duties she had to take care of, but I am fortunate to have a most excellent guest. He has been a practicing magician in multiple systems for over 15 years. He holds the highest initiatory rank in Haitian Voodoo. He's a Reiki master teacher and a licensed hypnotherapist and NLP practitioner. He's the founder of the Quantum Life Science Institute, a self-improvement and metaphysical school teaching both metaphysics and life skills. He's best known to the magical community through his book Hands-on Chaos Magick, and is former co-host of Deeper Down the Rabbit Hole, and is now going for his second master's degree, so his time is very valuable. Thank you for joining us, Andrieh Vitimus.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
This is really great for me because when I first got into Chaos Magick, after I was through, going through Pete Carroll's stuff and Phil Hine, yours was the next book that I picked up, and I learned a lot from it and really appreciated it.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I'm gonna throw out the first question that we ask everybody on the show. So, how did you get started in this craziness?
That's a good way to put it. I mean, I think I've been on other shows where people find out the horror that I was actually sort of an agnostic or maybe an atheist when I started. I know they give you the eye like, what? So do you believe in magic now, or are you just one of those people? Those people who just want to sell books but don't really believe in magic. No, I absolutely do believe in magic.
I don't see how those two things are contradictory.
Well, I'm not really. I mean, I don't either, but I actually do believe in magic and the whole spirits and stuff like that. Maybe not in the same way that the most religious of people do, but I started off, I was pretty atheistic. And probably a bit more agnostic. I just didn't really think that we could know the truth of the things out there. And at the time when I was just starting out, and this is no offense to anyone, I was getting exposed to a lot of Wicca. I was getting exposed to those type of paradigms which just didn't do it for me because I didn't see any of the people involved getting improvements in their life. And I thought that at that time, mind you, my mindset has changed, so everyone don't quote me out of context,
Sure.
Is that basically I thought at the time it wasn't rational, that it wasn't, this was at best bad psychology. And then I had what would be classically called a shamanic initiation, not by people, mind you, meaning things went horribly bad in a lot of ways. And that happens in life. The difference was when people around me told me they were staying away from me because they could see the shadows try to dive in around. Literally shadow-like people. My roommates got scared by it, and I was down in Champaign-Urbana, and I had to reassess this whole magic stuff a little bit. And no, that's not. I would hope that no one listening would have such an experience. I'd rather everyone like pick up my book, pick up everyone else's book, do it the slow way. But I got thrown in the deep end, and then I decided I wanted to live, and I wasn't going to let these things as they were, and I understand them now as demons. And mind you, if you check out my Facebook page or other things, realize I have no problems with demons, but it took a lot of years to get over that. And they pushed me to the breaking point until I would develop methods to defend myself. And the problem is that I wanted to be a biochemical scientist. If you know anything about the hard sciences, I still went and got a computer science master's degree, so I didn't really not want to be an engineer.
Mm.
But if you know anything about the hard sciences, there's a hard metric of results. Everything is very materialist, rational scientist, and that kind of, I had to come to some realizations. Now, I never completely left that skepticism aside. And there was a philosophy. When you look at all the books out there, I mean, people don't realize that Chaos Magick is almost as old as Wicca. There is a philosophy of agnostic magic, and that philosophy is Chaos Magick. It is essentially the philosophy that you do not necessarily believe in the truth of what you're doing until you try it repeatedly and see what the results has. That, if you listen to Peter Carroll for 5-10 minutes, you realize he's a scientist first who just happened to have weird experiences, and he's a physicist. And many people who get into Chaos Magick are much more geared toward sciences and engineering. They just don't accept the dogma without rational thought. And that's not to say that people do that, but it's to say there seems to be more people. Now, of course, does not include internet chaos magicians, so it includes people who have been doing it for a few years, you know?
Hey, now. No judging.
No judging, you know, but, I mean, the people who've been, you know, actually get into it, they've all seem to come from this kind of science background. And they're trying to... What? What was that?
Well, I would have to say I actually have a social sciences background, comparative religion, and the thing that got me with Chaos Magick is that I had a hard time believing that any one dogmatic belief system had it right.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what it comes down to. It's the agnostic. An agnostic sees something that is crazy, and they have to come to terms with it. You might come up with something that looks like Chaos Magick. Maybe everyone has a little bit of the truth. Maybe we don't know anything. Maybe this set of things works and this thing doesn't.
Yeah, to me, that whole nothing is true, everything is permitted kind of really hit me in the head with life experiences that weren't of an occult nature, but things that made me question who I was and where I was going with my life. Now, I'm going to kind of fanboy here because I've listened to your interviews on Occult of Personality. I've listened to Deeper Down the Rabbit Hole. You've mentioned before that you've got some family history that's a little bit occult.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of members of my family are into this stuff very deeply. And, I mean, you can look at every generation almost on one side of the family has either people who became priests, went to Haiti and got initiated just like I did, which is kind of weird that runs in the family too, but not, and or otherwise have really well-tested mediumship skills that you could put to the test. And that's something that I didn't know when I was first starting out. I wish I would have. Not that it would have changed anything, but it would have certainly made things in a different context. It would have, I would have been able to rely on people. But people don't talk about it. But then after I started really kind of diving down into it, even my great-grandfather spoke like 17 languages, which in the Christian text is considered a supernatural power. It's in the Bible as the art of tongues. And so there's all kinds of oddities that happen with my family that go back, that especially when the stories come out of Ukraine and what people were doing in Ukraine with like healings and all those kinds of things. So it's quite interesting to explore those stories. But yeah, you know, my brother was considered the dark magician of Chicago for a long time. You know, one of the darkest. He's pretty good at that stuff too, but he kind of decided, I don't want to hang out with the pagan and occult community anymore. I'm just gonna do my art. But even then, older members of my family, like I said, everyone seems to have weird oddities happen, and how they deal with those weird oddities determines whether or not they kind of get into a disciplined path of magic, or they just kind of have these abilities and let it sit there.
Something that you haven't elaborated on a lot that I've heard of before is, how did you end up getting to Haiti? What drew you to Haiti, and what happened there that led you to be initiated?
Well, before I went to Haiti, those spirits were bugging me for months. I mean, the Loire were coming to me every night, and I was just like, come on, really? At first, when I first started on voodoo, and I still like New Orleans voodoo because of its simplicity, and I had been doing it for years because they kept getting just unbelievable results for like survival issues. Like, you need a job? Boom! Next day you get a job after you're doing ritual. I mean, it's a pretty amazing level of results, and I would say they decided I was going to get initiated because I literally had I mean, my first encounter with Papa Leg was Veve. I like literally was sitting at the computer, and 3 hours went by, and I don't know what happened. Literally, I was just sitting there. The Veve is there. I'm researching Papa Legman. I'm out of the building for like 3 hours, and then from there, pretty much. Then I'm like looking around. What happened? It's 8 o'clock. How did that happen?
That's actually really cool. I'm sad that Colleen couldn't be here today because she had an extremely similar experience with Papa Legba and telling her stuff that no one could have known, and going out to a crossroads in the middle of the night and digging stuff up and finding things.
Yeah.
And so you're not the only one who's had this. So you were being contacted by these spirits, and then, hey, let's go to Haiti?
Well, like I said, they're already coming down to the point that I was doing New Orleans voodoo for 3 years, and it was one of those times where my mom had just died, and I was kind of like, well, what do I do? And long story is basically they just pulled me down there, and I mean, it was a very rewarding experience. I mean, maybe I do a couple things different. But it was what I needed at that point in time. So things had to change a little bit. And that's what happens. And that's pretty typical of voodoo. It's the spirits are imminent. They're not distant. I mean, I don't mean to say that in ceremonial magic the spirits are distant, but they really do feel distant. You reach out to them, contact them, and kind of form an interaction, and then maybe things happen. But that's not really how voodoo works. They come into your life and they say, we're going to turn everything upside down. And, you can get initiated or not, but we tell you should. And, well, many blessings will come on you if you do this. And they kind of back up their dreams. And they back up their just about everything that they say. They'll back it up. So I went to Haiti and got initiated.
What was that? What were some of the challenges in that?
I think, if I went back to Haiti, I would really spend a lot more time trying to learn Creole first. And second, finding the right mambos is difficult, and hugans. That's really the hardest part. So if anyone's listening, that's really the hardest part. You should go to somebody's house, when they do fets or other stuff several times, and get to know the person. It's supposed to be a family, and that's one thing that people forget about, particularly voodoo and maybe some of the ATRs, that this is a family. If people in the house are pretty much, they are justifiably, they don't like white people, that's not the house you should be in if you're white. Now, even though my grandmother is from Costa Rica and she's pretty African looking, I mean, you can't tell by looking at me, and I would tell everyone to make sure it's supposed to be a family. And families are dysfunctional, of course, but
Yeah.
if you can't interact with them on the basis of a family and they don't treat you like a family, wait, go find some other people. That would be the best advice I can give. That was probably the hardest challenge that I may or may not met, but and the second hardest challenge was that my papa, he died soon after we came back from Haiti. It's just because he was sick to start with, and he just wanted to be part of a initiation process again before he went. So that was hard to deal with too.
I could imagine. Speaking of magical organizations that can be family-like, another thing I haven't heard you talk much about is what is your involvement with the IoT?
No, I don't do anything with them anymore.
You don't do anything with them anymore.
No, I have no ill will towards them, but
Yeah.
I'm just doing my own thing now.
Can I ask prying questions? Because I have heard there was a rumor that you may have visited a certain temple in the central Badlands, Temple Ni Gai Kia. Any thoughts about your experiences there?
No, I mean, everyone could do their own thing, and people like spreading rumors and lies, and that's all I'm going to say about it. I'm not involved with them, and that's pretty much it. And you know what? I don't necessarily think that that's bad or good. It's just not for me anymore.
It's totally understandable. Pete Carroll did the same thing. I'll have to say, with my involvement in the IoT, no one has ever said anything bad about you or say anything other than you visited. So I was just kind of curious. I know how crazy that temple can be.
Let me put it this way. The IoT is the single best organization of practicing magicians in North America. All right? Hands down. Some of the stuff that comes along with that when you have a family life, though, is difficult to deal with, and people can take that and understand what I mean by that. When you have a family life, you have to be more careful about being exposed to certain things, and that's just how it is. And it's not that I have any ill will. Like I said, if anyone's listening, I'm saying that as far as practical magic goes, you will not find a better organization in the United States or the world than the IoT. I want to make that perfectly clear. However, I'm probably pretty good on my own. So sometimes you don't need to necessarily be part of an organization and get involved in politics. Sometimes the politics get in the way of the magic, and that's my focus, is really magic. And that's where I really want to focus on getting people to be able to do magic in their lives. And there's a lot of reason for that. There's a lot of charlatans out there. There's a lot of what they call, bullshit out there right now. But we need magic. Life is seemingly getting harder for a lot of people. So if you're a magician and you can't actually do practical magic, it's getting to be rough. You need to be able to get results and know which techniques are going to work. Because if anything, in the last week, we've seen things that really should scare a lot of people about the direction of things going. And if you really have faith and you really have the skills down to practical magic, you have a relatively high degree of confidence probably you're going to ride these storms out. And that's what it's about.
You're challenging me to talk about politics on the show. I
wasn't talking about politics. Hey, so...
I will have to say that I totally agree with you about the IoT, and that my personal challenges have been the conflict between being a family-oriented person and, the things that you do when you're a member of an organization like that. So I totally understand. Moving on, hands-on chaos magic. What inspires you to write that?
Well, you know what? People didn't understand, and I think a lot of the critics didn't understand that I have been involved in chaos magic a long time. And although you said 15 years, that book is from 2009, so it's actually 20 years plus now.
Yeah.
And what I saw hands-on Chaos Magic was an actualized version of Liber KKK. If you know anything about Peter Carroll, in his later stages, what Peter Carroll put out as the Adeptus Major, or whatever you want to call it, of practical magic was called Liber KKK. It was a challenge to the magician to be able to do.
And I always warn people, nothing to do with the KKK organization.
And
he's English. He
doesn't get it. Yeah. I mean, we could have probably had the same results as Wicca with Chaos Magic in the States if he'd named it something other than Chaos Magic, because Chaos has such a negative reputation that it doesn't in the UK. You know, like if he named it Quantum Magic or Postmodern Magic or, you know, I don't know, something, you know, crazy magic, whatever. I don't know. But he's a physicist and he meant it mathematically. But so the first, and it took me 2 tries to write that book too, by the way. And it's 400 pages. The first time I wrote this wonderful Chaos Magic book, it was like 150 pages. It would have been fine on the wall and shelf, you know, in or another bookshelf. And I looked at it and I said, "To hell with this." No, I said, "To hell with this. This is like every other book on the market." And it made the same kind of assumptions about who would be getting into magic. That I was glad that I did that, because that has proven to me to be wrong consistently. Of who would get into magic is very different than people who are really tight in the community think it is. It's very different. And I set out to write a book based on my experiences, not the story of what happened when I was dealing with those shadow things, but what I had to know, what you actually had to know to actually make shit happen, in purposely not using language of jargon and not using language of as if you studied magic for 10 years. Because to me, that would meet the requirements of like a Liber KKK. The first book I did actually did. And then when I tore it down, I really tried to break it down into the point that, you know, if you just started out, you could follow hands-on Chaos Magic and get to the point that I would consider you a pretty decent magician. If you were religious, not religious per se, but if you were disciplined about your practice, it would get you there. And that's what I set out to do. So I set out combining the ideas of Liber KKK and then basically tearing it all down to basically make it so that way it could be make it without the jargon that is in so many occult books, easy to understand, and doing that creates lots of critics, as you can imagine.
You know, and after I read the book, I was so moved in that this was the book I thought that the U.S. really needed at the time, because there wasn't that kind of basic starter book, kind of like High Magic. There was nothing like that for Chaos Magic. And Pete Carroll, bless him, he is a scientist and he writes for brevity. And there's a lot of density in his text, but he does not explain things. He suffers no fools.
No, he doesn't explain things, and that's just how he is. I mean, that wasn't his goal. He was writing to people who were already experienced magicians. What I set out to do is I kind of decided there needed to be a book that could help people deal with magic on the ground. Now, I'm firmly under the firm belief that doing magic has its own alchemy. That as you do magic, you'll go out and seek the more intellectual sources. Even though hands-on Chaos Magic was researched more than people think, and the techniques were much more in practice researched, much more than lots of people think. And that simplicity of language was also purposely a challenge for myself to show that I had mastery over it. That by explaining it in simple words, I know that I really understood those concepts, and that was part of the challenge of writing the book, to really get past the jargon, to really put it there. And the thing is that I don't care if people take the hands-on chaos magic stuff. They do it, and then they decide to go into Thelema. Great. I wish you the best. Because by that point, when you're going into Thelema, I know that if you've disciplinedly followed what's in hands-on chaos magic, those angels will show up for you. And when you do planetary magic, your life will change. And I don't always get that feeling when I deal with some other ceremonial magicians when they first start out. I don't always get the feeling from the rituals, and this is not a rip on them, that things will show up, or they intend for things to show up. I know that someone coming from a hands-on practical background gets into some more intellectual disciplines, they will make sure things show up, and they will get the results, and their life will get better or worse depending on the choices they make. And that's really what I was hoping to do, is just open that door to much stronger practical magics, because ultimately I would like to go to the festivals and see rituals that kick my ass. I wouldn't just want to be leading them, right? Usually it's me leading them, and it is ass kicking happens. No, I would rather be able to also go to other festivals and get an ass kicking at the same level that I could dish out, because that's what we as magicians need to see. Not necessarily we need to see it, but it's fun, and it helps us fine-tune our own practices.
And one thing I've always argued is that if you start out practicing magic in order to get results, you end up truly proving to yourself that magic is real.
Yes.
And the immensity of that realization will lead you to use it in ways to perfect yourself and to perfect the universe, and not for petty gain.
And well, sometimes petty game's okay. I mean, I guess.
Well,
I gave this exact talk down in the Western Mystery Conference. I was probably the only non-ceremonial magician besides David Beth. And my talk was basically about how the practice of magic is alchemy in itself. You might not think it. And everyone thinking by telling your coven mates or telling your lodge members to not curse somebody or not cast love spells or not cast money spells, that's what they're doing behind your back. I mean,
and to clarify, by alchemy you mean transformation of the self.
Yeah, I mean transformation by the self. I don't mean formalized medieval alchemy. So I mean transformation of the self. It's a process that when you actually do so much of it, it transforms you in ways you don't expect. And the analogy that I use is that everyone starts off by doing spells for vengeance, money, and sex, or other things like that. I mean, it's pretty much, even Maslow says that's what you start off. And every magician you hear about, they start out with money, sex, or the same thing, you know. And then you get those things. And then what? Then you have to start asking questions. And the ethics that derive from the practice of magic are much more ethics that are core ethics. If someone tells you to be ethical, you have no understanding of what that means unless you've worked through various philosophical or magical questions that come up through experience. So at this point, I know that the people that I've trained and studied with, they are ethical in themselves. They're true to themselves. Why? Because they've had the bruises where they've made mistakes. You know, that's like one of my friends, or from Jason, who was now the person who runs Deeper Down the Rabbit Hole, would say, he knew he could do like magic for getting people to sleep with him. But why? That's not what he wants.
Yeah.
That is a level of wisdom that doesn't come from books. That's a level of wisdom that comes from actually sitting down and doing the magic and screwing it up and getting that and then saying, yeah, that didn't work out so well. Maybe that didn't make me any happier. The same thing is true for curse work. I mean, you could tell people not to do curse work, and sometimes it's justified to do curse work. I mean, that's that's not the party line out there on the internet. But sometimes it's very justified to do curse work, especially if your family is in danger, or somebody is trying to use witchcraft in the mouth to take your job out. Well, at that point, it's a survival issue. It's not necessarily an anger issue. But the same people who do curse work all the time, eventually, they decide this hasn't helped them any. Again, if it's the forbidden fruit, there isn't that transformation. If it's all on the table at first, then all of a sudden it just becomes boring.
Yeah, Peter Gray, when talking about apocalyptic witchcraft, said that to divide it into white magic and black magic does harm to the entirety of the being of the goddess, and I think that also applies to ourselves, and magicians, seeing themselves as an inner divinity or spiritual being, to say that you don't have this negative or don't have this positive, you're doing a damage to the whole.
No, I mean, it's been 5 years since I wrote Hades like Chaos Magick. I would consider myself going down a much more shamanic, a serious shamanic, and I should phrase that, like serious, hardcore shamanic route. But yeah, all these things are part of nature. It's not like, I mean, somebody on my wall just posted a picture of how seals were going and raping penguins. Okay, I mean, and that's a real story from National Geographic. So obviously nature is not always so nice. And to be able to know where to use and control those aggressive forces within and without, it leads to a more adaptive thing. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean cursing people either. That's one big difference. Working with dark forces doesn't mean you're cursing people. Not at all. I like working with the Goetia like the next person. There's Loa that I work with that are definitely more aggressive, but it doesn't mean that I'm doing many curses, because I'm not. It means that I understand they have a place and there's certain uses for them. And that's a radically different mindset than I think many people have. And I think, when we're talking about wealth magic, when we're talking about survival, when we're talking about getting ahead, there's a way to do it that you can look yourself in the mirror, and there's a way that's not. And people have to figure that out. And the only way they figure that out is by trying it the way that usually is the way that is not right for them, and seeing how it doesn't work out. And then what happens? Well, then the course corrects itself. I mean, if we don't get all shameful and, self-hating, there is this alchemy that happens where you have a realization continuously that, man, this isn't what I want. This is not what I want. This didn't work out. The results might be there. And that's an ethical choice at that point. Because if you have the power to make things happen and choose to do something else, that is ethics. If you do not have the power to make that choice and make something happen, I don't really consider an ethical choice if you're on the receiving end of basically being a slave and getting told to do things. That's not ethics anymore. It's ethics when you have a choice and can make that decision, and that decision reflects who you actually are. Of course, that comes after probably years and years and years of getting rid of garbage that we get put into us all the time. But after those years, more and more decisions, I hope, for everyone will be reflecting the mirror of who they actually are and where they actually are going.
Okay. Well, talking about helping people help themselves, you could probably give a better description than I did of your kind of newish endeavor right now, the Quantum Life Sciences Institute.
Well, right now I'm running a shapeshifting course and going to grad school, so but the shapeshifting course is kind of what we're all running in the Quantum Life Science Institute. Basically, the Quantum Life Science Institute, there's an inner core that's much more mystery school-like, and almost like a inner core mystery school / mastermind group. And we try to bring the best techniques, both psychological and spiritual, because I don't really think there should be a difference, to the table to help people really kind of get ahead. And by get ahead, that doesn't mean, trample on your neighbor. It means you have to understand that we all come to the table with lots of limitations, and how do we get past those? Because, again, from my point of view, I'd like to see a world where people are actually manifesting the things they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's art, whether it's music, whether it's businesses, whether it's whatever it is. Because that's a more interesting world to live in than where we're going right now.
So how did that lead to shape changing?
Shapeshifting is one of the core classes I've wanted to teach for a while. And if you can break down your social limitations and really understand the patterning that social limitations have on you, and how social limitations constrain the choices that you have, you can then move into greater and greater levels of self-autonomy. But then it becomes, again, experiential, because you see the restrictions for what they are, or understand them, not just I tell you, okay, here's the restrictions of society. You have to actually go and experiment, and that's why shapeshifting is a great way to do that, to go and experiment in your social circles with yourself, to understand where are these limitations, and then that gives you an idea of how to transcend them, how to move past them, to become fluid, to almost become like chaos or the Tao itself. And I think that's to exist in a world that doesn't necessarily have personal dualities means you can walk towards any path and you're okay. It'll be adaptable. And that is why shapeshifting, why I taught the shapeshifting class. While it's one of my favorite classes that I wanted to teach for 5 years, and I just got off my butt and decided to go all in on this. It's stuff that we've been doing in the school for a while, but it's stuff that I said, okay, I'm going to go all in. And I went all in from the Left Hand Path Conference on, before the Left Hand Path Conference, to say, okay, here I'm teaching a class on this. I'm going to teach workshops on this. I really like this type of stuff, and I've been really doing this as a method to work with not just psychological and social, but your own energy in this kind of shifting way until the point at which you get past those limitations. Because real spiritual contact, and I know real from Chaos Magician is kind of like, what the hell? But I mean a real contact of any sort, even a real archetypal contact, if you want to go completely psychological, should be radically changing. It should be radically changing, and it should rock your world. And if you've done all these kind of flexibility things to mutate your social circles, and mutate your mental and energy circles, and start working with your physical body, it becomes a lot easier for those actual contacts to rip your world apart. And that's exactly what we want when we're doing magic. We don't want nothing to happen. We want our world to be torn asunder. All of a sudden there's a new world there. Every ritual has a potential for that. It's just the training ahead of the ritual that determines whether or not that happens a lot of the time.
You know, I had the pleasure of being at that Left Hand Path conference and attending your shape-shifting seminar, and I got to say there definitely was a whole lot of energy in the room and in me. What would you say makes shape-shifting different from classical invocation? Is it that fluidity of it, or is it permanent change?
Ultimately, it depends whose invocation you're talking about. I mean, because there's invocation where you call something to the room. There's invocation where you call something inside you.
I guess classically, you call it into the room evocation, you call it into yourself invocation.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest difference for me between the two is, yes, when you do an invocation, you are pulling that entity inside of you, and it might make some changes. As you go deeper into shapeshifting, you're not just pulling the entity inside you and making changes. you are changing yourself to take on qualities consistent with that. So, for instance, one of the things that we actually teach in the mystery school type of things, it's a secret that I'm going to give now. It's not really a secret, but we don't really have too many secrets. There are some secrets that we have, but not really too many, because secrets are all out in the internet anyway. So,
yeah.
And the biggest secret of all is to go experience rituals like that, you know. So, but one of the things that we teach is like, how do we make an angel self? Not how do we summon an angel into us. How do we make a self that reflects angel energy? And how do we reflect a self that reflects demon energy? It isn't some external spirit. It's you. You're the demon at that point. You're the angel. And how then at that point does that change your interactions with the spiritual forces if you are interacting as one of them? And I can tell you it changes the interactions a whole bunch.
Huh. It sounds to me almost like a mix between invocation and creating a servitor, where you're kind of creating this other self that comes into you. Would that be a correct way to look at it?
Sort of. It's definitely much more of a shamanic technique, you know, because it's been around the block. I'm sure this is what shamans of old used to do. I don't know if this is quite a servitor, as it is you're developing an aspect of yourself. It depends on how you define servitor at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, most people determine servitors as kind of like you go off and send them out. But it is a thought form of yourself. But we all have thought forms of ourselves. And this is one of the big things you learn if you really do magic a lot, especially chaos or shamanic or other things that are not so structured, is we all have thought forms of ourselves. I mean, here's Andrieh Vitimus, the thought form of myself. You know, here's James Wilbur, thought form of himself, doing a performance that is or is not necessarily him in a different situation. Here's all these stars doing thought forms of themselves. Well, how do they do that? That has to be, is that just a thought form or is it an aspect of themselves? Now, if it's an aspect of yourself, if it's just a thought form, people can step into it and then they're not a star. But if it's an aspect of themselves, that says so much more interesting things about the nature of the self and how many different ways you can mutate it and change and become, and how many different things you could become.
It reminds me of, I was rereading Hands-on Chaos Magic in preparation, and what stuck out of me was the part where you're writing how important it is for a magician to write the story of themselves, to write the story of what they want to do, and how important it is to have that own mythology.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe your mythology includes these different things. Like, it just depends on the person, but until you get to the point that you're testing those boundaries, it's really hard to know what the story should be. And if you're mutating yourself a whole bunch, and you know, obviously you're doing it a good way, so you're not necessarily going into rehab all the time, you know, because you're going crazy. There's a lot of benefits. You know, old habits, you just mutate past them. You just know, oh, here we go, new life, here we go, here's a new life, right? I'm something else now. And that's all shape-shifting, right? And of course, then I just draw a slight distinction between the servitor and taking aspect. It's like a more core aspect of myself. Like if I was, if I have to call a servitor mask over myself, that's a different, it's not core, it's not internalized. I've internalized and know that I don't want to say part of me is angelic, but really part of me becomes angelic, or part of me becomes demonic, because I can pull those aspects that I've worked with forward. It's not that I can't escape the responsibility either of what I do in those states. It's not like when I'm invoked, I can be like, hey, you know, it's just a sleight of hand here. It wasn't me, it was the spirit. No, it was me. It was just a radically different aspect of me. And that is very empowering. It's also very empowering that then to me, that you can't get out of the self-responsibility at that point either. So you might be taking on a more negative aspect of yourself, but it's still you. It's still parts of you. And exploring that and doing that kind of work drugs up all these different possibilities that are so wonderful and horrible at the same time. And that, I think, dragging those up and working with them is probably one of the best parts of the great work, because even the bad parts become something different, something that gets put into the service of the story of your life, whatever that is.
Excellent. So I have a feeling this subject might bleed into the next thing that I wanted to talk about. You have said that you are writing a new book, and I was wondering if you were willing to reveal some more of what that's going to be about and what we might expect.
Well, it's been 5 years, so I always say I'm writing a new book. I have like 10 new books sitting there. But I have really, there's 2 books that I really am trying to commit to and focus on. First is a fire magic book, and that book really is going to cover different techniques of fire magic from different cultures. It won't quite be as, universal as Hands-On Chaos Magic was, because I'm really covering just fire magic. Now, you might think, well, how many different things can you do with fire magic? Let me tell you, there's a whole lot. It's an amazing amount, and there's amazing amount of different ritual structures that you can use. And I want to try to cover that in real kind of thorough depth. The other book that I always toss around that everyone knows that I want to write is basically this book on non-bullshit fairy magic. But I realized really early on in that book that I needed to get back into teaching and writing down all the notes about shapeshifting before it's possible to cover any sort of stuff on the fairies that isn't based in supplication magic. And by supplication magic, if there's no problem, I don't have any problem with that, but that basically means you offer gifts and praise, and it's pretty typical to work with the fairies to offer those gifts and candy and different things to get rewards that they may or may not give you. That's classical supplication magic. To write a book on fairy magic that is not supplication magic requires that people have a real good understanding of where their social, mental, and even physical boundaries are, so they can deal with something that is primarily very alien to us in its nature.
Cool. So what would you say, what is Andrieh Vitimus? You said you're really into shamanism right now. What is your daily practice? What does that look like?
See, it doesn't look very shamanic. It's going to sound pretty bad and pitiful, right? I sit there and do chakra work every morning on the train and try to make sure that my chakras are completely balanced and touch into my own divinity every morning, and then try to do some qigong to really pack the qi in and really focus on what am I trying to do, what can I change myself to, how can I adapt myself so it isn't that I am ignoring the shapeshifting. What lessons can I teach myself, or what things do I have to learn to back up the magic that I'm doing on various wealth fronts? Obviously, if I'm going for a Masters Business Association, wealth's on the mind. But that means, what else do I have to change about myself to make sure that I grab hold of every opportunity? And some of that might be as simple as writing more compelling copy over and over and over. And copy, I mean, advertising and things like that. Or other things might be going to Toastmasters meetings and really practicing my public speaking and really get good at it. Now I'm a pretty good public speaker, but I mean really good at it. These things don't sound like magic, but when they're put into a greater picture of will, they are magical acts by the virtue of the fact there's an intention behind the practice, even if it doesn't look like magic. Then, of course, I work with all my voodoo spirits, because that's how it rolls when you're been initiated. They don't let you alone. They don't leave you.
Ignoring them is always a bad idea.
No, no. You don't want to do that.
So we're coming up on the hour mark. Tell me, do you have any plans right now for future public appearances?
The only next public appearance that I'm going to be doing is Convocations, which is in Detroit in the end of February. And I think I'm going to they have me doing a full Mass of Chaos ritual, Mass of Chaos Baphomet ritual. I haven't really scheduled anything out past there because I kind of learned my lesson from the Left Hand Path conference that when people tell me that the classes are going to be easy, they're probably lying to me. So I haven't scheduled any public things, but I am going to be running December 1st. I'm running the Shapeshifting e-course, of which there's about 50 people in the first run of it, and they've raved about it. They've really loved it so far. And then December 1st, I'm going to run that again, and probably I'll have a couple webinars in January and throughout the year. But yeah, Convocation is the only thing that I've planned. So
I've heard much goodness about your previous events at Convocation. You have a tendency to rock the house.
I'm a very good ritualist, and those rituals aren't just theatrical, and that's surprisingly, as they would say, rebellious in a way. It's very rebellious. If you go to a lot of festivals, you understand why I say that's quite punk rock of me to go out there and do those types of rituals, because they're not done, and they need to be done. People need to see what's possible so they can do it on their own.
Yeah, well, I think there are public rituals like Pagan Pride Fest, stuff like that, where things are deliberately toned down, and then you get events like Convocation that are semi-open. I've been to Babylon Rising, which is a giant freak fest, and I mean that in the best possible way. But yeah, having the ability to get people together and focused on a ritual like that's an amazing skill.
Oh, we've had I think the worst one out of the things that we did at Convocation was definitely still the Corazon ritual. That one sucked. I mean, it was awesome. I mean, people had physical scratches on their back and burn marks after the ritual because reality broke that hardcore in the ritual, which is cool. But man, it sucked. I wouldn't do that one again.
and that's very punk rock to say, well, this is the biggest, baddest demon Aleister Crowley encountered. Let's summon him.
Well, you know what? It was a ritual on the point of the tarot card, the Tower, and that's exactly what Corazon brought everyone. The destruction of their world. Every part of it to reconstruct. Yes. That's a beautiful thing and a terribly awesome thing at the same time. So then I haven't done that ritual again. But we did a Michael ritual last year, which was phenomenal, where I got possessed by the angel, and we've done a Ra ritual. This is probably the second time I'm doing a Mass of Chaos Baphomet, so and I have my own non-Peter Carroll version of that, which is awesome. So it's also very trippy. So if you go to Convocation, you get to see. Andrieh Vitimus doesn't just write books. I can actually do pretty hardcore magic.
Does that include an invocation of Baphomet at the end?
Oh yeah.
Excellent.
Not in the standard format, though. It's worse than the standard format. Worse or better? Worse or better because it's not just one person that Baphomet gets invoked into. So I'll leave it at that.
I get to pass them around.
You got to go to Convocation to figure out and see what that's going to be like. These are kind of techniques that, we've been working on in the mystery part of the school for a while, and it's just different style of magic that doesn't necessarily fit the invocation evocation borderline. So it'll be very, very interesting. And if you are ever part of a massive chaos that I've done, and I've done like a lot of them, for many of the years, I can guarantee you that this will be quite illuminating to see where I've been going in the last 5 years, and the differences in maybe in the straight massive chaos that I would have done 12, 13 years ago versus what I'm pulling out now. I think everyone will be quite illuminating, actually, and quite illuminating, powerful ritual. I still consider that ritual to be the ritual that has, in my personal experience, created more magicians than any other ritual I've seen. I mean, actual magicians. Not just, we're going to do this stuff. Like, there's something about that ritual format and Baphomet is the baptizer, if you want to say, from the Cabal series, from,
and one of the complaints I've heard from people within the IoT about the IoT is the kind of stagnation of those basic chaos magic rituals, like the mess of chaos, and it's nice to see that.
That's on them, right?
That's on them.
I'm doing other stuff, right? So
magic progresses. It does not stand still.
There's lots of different ways you can do that. It's only Peter Carroll just gave a framework and said, do whatever you want. I mean, he really did. And then there's other ritual constructions that really tap into Baphomet that I still think, like I said, this ritual I have seen create more actual magicians. I mean, where they start, where people came to the ritual from a much more pagan point of view. Magic's not real. It's all in your head. It's just words. And then they come out with this. No, there's something to this. There's more than just these words. There's more than psychological magic. And I've seen it happen. And I love it. I mean, that's the world that I want to live in. I want to see a world with more of those type of people in it. More people to hang out in coffee shops. That when you talk about how you got summoned a demon or whatever you're doing and got freaked out and it was cool, you can have that conversation.
Yeah. Arcanorium College. I know you've been an instructor there in the past. I know you're a really busy guy. Any plans on going back there sometime in maybe the far future?
Yes. I don't know when. I got to talk to Frater Fool and some other people. I mean, I'm always welcome at Peters University, and I really plan to teach the fire. Well, I mean, obviously I have to fit it in between school, but when the Fire Magic book the Fire Magic book's already 100 pages in, which, if I was a lesser principled man, that would be enough to put out as a book already. That's not going to happen because I am a perfectionist. I must kill that demon of perfectionism at least sometimes. But I really want a book that really explores this fire magic concept because it was something that I used to get through really dark periods of my life. And it's more, I like it. Let's put it that way. Okay. To poetic, fire is life, and if you have to have a contest with death, maybe you should have it on your side. That should sell the book by itself, right there.
I am a big fan of all the Firebringer trickster gods. Prometheus, Loki, that fire's good stuff.
Exactly. And as soon as I get that to the place that it's a little further along, I'll tell Peter I want to teach a class on the fire magic.
Very
stuff.
Cool.
Because I've had to work out some digital techniques to. I mean, most obviously fire is fire, right? I mean, you have to have a physical fire. Not always, but it's helpful if you're doing fire magic. And then there's a lot of tricks to make it work over webcams that you can, and over a digital communication style that we live in to make one ritual be effective over, that's one fire ritual, be effective over different media streams. Because, of course, in the literal way, once you get down to the techniques, electricity and the electrons going back and forth is sort of a form of fire. And it just takes those techniques I've been working on the last couple years. I really have been working on how can I get this fire ritual when I have a big fire here to really affect people that aren't present and really have it be repeatable. So those techniques are stuff that, while not necessarily are going to be in the Fire Magic book, they are techniques that I need to have down to teach a course at the Arcanorium on it.
Cool.
So it's kind of like, here I am doing, quality assurance on my magical classes for the Arcanorium's benefit.
Excellent. We are pretty much out of time. What's the best way for people to contact you as far as social media or anything like that?
Well, I'm not on Facebook as much, but my Facebook page is Andrieh Vitimus. Generally speaking, if you send an email to andriehvitimus@gmail.com, that's probably the best way. If you're interested in the Shapeshifting course, there's a few days left, December 1st. Just go to my website. You get on my newsletter. I'm going to send a Black Friday discount out for anyone who signs up for December 1st. I know the gross commercialism of it. But we got to eat.
I'm for anything that encourages people to stay home on Black Friday. So they can stay home and do that.
They can stay home and do that. I don't have to go out. It's all on my newsletter. And it's on my webpage. And I hope some people will sign up for it. I mean, really, the stuff that we're covering in the Shapeshifting class, like outside of the first week or so, I haven't seen it in any other books. And I asked other people if they've ever seen this stuff before. And I've had people who are actually Qigong masters and doctors in Chinese medicine look over the material to make sure that the Qigong that I'm covering is effective. And not only effective, but innovative. Innovative in a positive way, as in not just innovation for its own sake, but really, really powerful stuff. So, the best way, andriehvitimus@gmail.com. Check out my website. Sooner or later, I might come back on deeper down the rabbit hole as soon as things calm down a little. I get to the easy classes.
Excellent. People can visit our website for the show notes, scrollwiththoth.com. I'm going to have links there to Andrieh's Facebook and to his website and his book and things like that. While you're there, you can use our Amazon search window. You can search for Hands-On Chaos Magick and get that there. We get a couple pennies. You get the same Amazon experience. We've also got our PayPal button. Buck a show is an excellent way to donate. Just a little show of appreciation for us entertaining you for an hour or so. We've got a phone number, 317-296-3247. You can call, ask questions, leave comments. Also leave comments on iTunes and Stitcher, wherever you find this. You can connect with me at jameslwilbur.com, jameslwilbur.tumblr.com, scrollthoth.tumblr.com. I've got way too many social media outlets. Our music is provided by Shoebox Recordings. The intro was a selection from Journey by Coben, and leading us out is Hair Dye by East Coast. Andrieh, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I hope I'll come back sometime and we can talk again.
You have some good holidays.
You too.